instead of distress and destruction, instead of the gloom of anguish, instead of walking in darkness and feeling a cloud over you, would you love to have trust? Would you love to not be afraid? Would you love to have joy and strength? Would you love a resting place? A place where springs of water come up and satisfy your soul? We'll talk about it today. Oh, beloved, we have come to that marvelous, marvelous final segment of chapters 7 through 12. We have come to chapter 11 and 12. We have come to the third prophecy that we want to look at, the third prophecy that tells us about Jesus Christ. We saw the first one in Isaiah 7:14, and we saw a child is born. His name is Emmanuel, God with us. And if we don't believe that Jesus is God, we won't last. We're going to perish. We're going to die in our sins. We saw Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, about this child being given to us, this child that was born and this son that was given, so that the government of our lives would be upon his shoulders. And now we have come to Isaiah chapter 11, and we see a prophecy about a shoot, about a branch, about a root. And what does a shoot, a branch, and a root have to do with you and me? Well, it has to do with the opening to this program. It has to do with a glorious rest. It has to do with trusting and not being afraid. It has to do with salvation and the benefits of salvation. So let's look at Isaiah chapter 11. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse. Now, who is Jesse? Jesse is the father of David. And when it's talking about a shoot that is coming from the stem of Jesse, it's talking about a tree that has been felled. Outside our front door, there's a big shrub with a big root that we got rid of. But we didn't uproot it, we just cut it down. And right out of that root, that flat piece of wood, there is a shoot that is coming. This is the picture that he wants you to see here. It's a marvelous picture, and we're going to put it all together. But it says, a shoot, there will be a young growth. Now, what has happened is God has spoken to the house of David through Ahaz, and they have not listened. And God has told them, you're not going to last. So is that the end of the house of David? Is that the end of Jesse's seed? Oh no, there's a shoot coming. It says, and a branch, a sapling. It says, from its roots will bear fruit. In other words, from the roots of this felled tree, there is going to come a branch, and that branch is going to bear fruit. Now, what have we seen? Well, we see the kings of Judah and Jerusalem, so to speak, of the line of David get worse and worse and worse. Oh, some good ones come to the fore, but we see them get worse and worse. But this one that's coming from Jesse is a new, so to speak, David. And it says, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit, now listen carefully, of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. He's not only going to know God, but it is a knowing of God that has a fear and a respect of the Lord. He's talking about Messiah. He's talking about Jesus that is going to come. He's talking about the child that is going to be born, the son that is going to be given, the government that is going to be upon his shoulders, and the increase of his government, of which there will be no end. This is the one he's talking about. It's the third prophecy about Messiah. And you want to mark knowledge. I color every reference to knowledge in a dark green. Now, remember, the children of Israel, it tells us in Isaiah 5, are going to go into captivity for a lack of knowledge. But here is one that is coming. Here is one that is going to sit on the throne of David that will have a spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. It says he will delight in the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the respect and the trust of the Lord. He will not judge by what his eyes see, and he will not make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness, put a blue R over it now, we're marking righteousness that way, he will judge the poor. Even the poor, he's not going to be swayed by looking at them and seeing their abject poverty or that. He is going to deal with absolute righteousness. He will judge the poor and decide with fairness, with a straightness, with an equitable decision for the afflicted of the earth. And then it makes a statement. He will smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. What has he just done? Now watch, he has just jumped from the first coming of Jesus Christ to the second coming of Jesus Christ. The first time he comes as a suffering servant. The second time he comes to judge in righteousness, because they have had that opportunity to believe that he is God with us. They have had that opportunity to submit to him and put the government of their lives on their shoulders. But now he is not only going to have the Spirit of the Lord on him, and he's not only going to judge, but he is going to afflict the earth with the rod of his mouth. And just imagine a sword coming out of my mouth. And let's go to Revelation chapter 19, and let's look at what he says in Revelation 19, and you want to put down verse 15. It says, from his mouth, and it's talking about when he comes, when heaven opens and he comes on a white horse. And it says in verse 15, from his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So now let's go back to Isaiah. And he jumps to what's going to happen when he rules upon the earth. It says, and the wolf will dwell with the lamb. The leopard will lay down with the young goat, and a calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little boy will lead them. A little boy's leading a wolf. A little boy's leading a leopard. It says also the cow and the bear will graze. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. But amazing thing is that this little nursing child that is still crawling or maybe just learning how to walk, this little nursing child will flop down by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand into the viper's den, into the snake's den, and he won't get bitten. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. Listen, for the earth will be covered with the knowledge of the Lord. Remember, Hosea says, my people are perishing for a lack of knowledge. Hosea is a contemporary with Isaiah. Isaiah says, my people have gone into captivity because of a lack of knowledge. But now the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. This is the kingdom that is coming. The increase of his government which will be an increase of peace, and it will go on forever and ever. And that's what we saw in Isaiah chapter 9 in verse 7, and from then on and forevermore. This is what's coming. From the one, the shoot, from the branch, now watch, from the root. Then, in that day, put a circle around the then, a green circle, and then with your green pen underline in that day. In what day? In the day when he will smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and the wolf will dwell with the lamb, etc. It says in that day. Now watch what's going to happen. This is so neat. The nations will resort to the root of Jesse. Wait a minute. I thought he was a branch. I thought he was a shoot. Now you're telling me he's a root? Oh yes, he's the root and he's the shoot. He's the Alpha and he's the Omega. He's the beginning and he's the end. And if you think about it, you go back to Genesis 3:15, where God pronounces judgment on the serpent who seduces Eve. And he says, I will put enmity between you and between the woman, between her seed and your seed. Enmity. Who is the seed of the woman? The seed of the woman is Jesus. It's the first promise of the Messiah, the first promise of the deliverer. And then you get to Genesis chapter 49, and you have Jacob making a promise to Judah. And it says, and the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. Shiloh means to whom it belongs. In other words, you go from this one that is to come. He's to come through Judah. And now you get here and you get other places, and he is to come through David. He is the shoot, he is the branch, and he is the root of Jesse. All things came into being by him, by Jesus, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. Root and shoot. And so it says, and the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. What does that mean? We'll talk about it in just a minute. And his resting place will be glorious. Oh, don't you long for a glorious rest? Life is so busy. It is so hectic. We are pulled in so many different directions. It is noise, 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 and it is stress, 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 stress. But there is a day coming when his resting place will be glorious. Now watch what it says in Isaiah chapter 11 verse 10 as we look at this final prophecy. Remember, I said it's in verse 1 and it's in verse 10. And in verse 1 we see Messiah, who is the shoot and who is the branch. And now we see that he is the root. And it says, and that day the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the people. In other words, he will stand as a banner. He will stand there and the people will see him and they will resort. They will come to the one who is the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and when they get there, his resting place will be absolutely, totally glorious. Then it will happen on that day, the same time, that the Lord will again recover a second time with his hand. Personally, I believe that he's talking about the second, after the second dispersion. There was one in 586 BC there, and then many of them were brought back to the land. Then there was another one in 70 AD, and we know a lot have come back to Israel, but he's going to bring them from the four corners of the earth. It says, the remnant of his people who will remain. Now remember, we're watching that word remnant. And there are several scriptures that we could turn to, and they're in your study guide. And you can go online, preceptsforlife.com, and you can download a free study guide. But until then, I just want you to look for a minute at Zechariah, so that you see in Zechariah this reference in chapter 13 to the remnant. It says, it will come about, verse 8, in all the land declares the Lord, that two parts in it will be cut off and they will perish, but the third will be left in it. And I will bring the third part through the fire, refine them as silver is refined, test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them, and I will say, they are my people. And they will say, the Lord is my God. So this is the remnant who will remain. They will come from Assyria, verse 11 of chapter 11, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. You want to mark all those places as geographical locations. He will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And that's what you read about in Matthew chapter 24. It says, then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart. Those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim, the northern kingdom, will not be jealous of Judah. Judah will not harass Ephraim. They will swoop down together on the slopes of the Philistines on the west, that's Gaza and all that place. And together they will plunder the sons of the east. They will possess Edom and Moab, and the sons of Ammon will be subject to them. That's present-day Jordan. The Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt. He will wave his hand over the river. What river? The river Euphrates. And you can even read about that in Revelation chapter 16, verse 12, with a scorching wind. He will strike it into 7 streams and make men walk over dry shod. There will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant of his people who will be left, just as there was for Israel in the day that they came up out of the land of Egypt. God has a remnant. The holy seed is the stump, as Isaiah 6 says in that very last verse. Then, chapter 12, you will say on that day, you who? This remnant that is returning, I will give thanks to you, O Lord, for although you were angry with me, your anger is turned away, and you comfort me. Behold, God is my salvation. And you want to mark salvation. You can just color it red if you want to, or put a cross over it. I will trust and not be afraid, for the Lord is my strength and song, for he has become my salvation. Why? Because this child that was born, the son that was given, that is God with us, you have put the government of your life upon his shoulders, and there is no end to the increase of his government or of peace. It says, therefore you will joyously draw water, verse 3 of chapter 12, from the springs of salvation. And in that day you will say, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among the peoples, make them remember that his name is exalted. And what shall he be called? Isaiah 9:6, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. This is him, Emmanuel, God with us, the prophecies that we have studied. The branch, the shoot, the branch, and the root. It says, praise the Lord in song, for he has done excellent things. Let this be known. Now I love this. Double underline it in green. It's a geographical location. Let this be known in all the earth. Cry aloud and shout for joy, O inhabitant of Zion. Zion, he's talking about the earthly Zion. He's talking about Jerusalem. So listen to what he says. For great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. The son that the virgin had, who was called Emmanuel, is in Zion. Will be in Zion, will be in the midst of the people. The child that was born, the son that was given, the one whose name is Wonderful Counselor, etc., the one whose government will be upon the government of our lives will be upon his shoulders. He is in Zion. The one that is the shoot, the one that is the branch, the one that is the root, he is in Zion. So cry and shout, for great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. And when you go to Revelation, to the very last chapter of Revelation, in chapter 22, this is what you read. It says, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to these things for the churches. I am the root. It's not just for Israel. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, now the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and the bride is us, say, come. And let everyone who hears say, come. And let one who is thirsty come. Let the one who wishes to take of the water of life do it without cost. Why? There will be wells of salvation if you will allow the government of your life to be upon the shoulders of the Son of God, who came and died for you, was made sin, buried, raised from the dead, and is coming again as King of Kings. And what, beloved, is God's precept for life for you today? It's this: his resting place is glorious. It is glorious. Quit striving, quit fighting, quit quarreling, quit shaking your fist against God, quit taking back what you commit to him, thinking that you can do it better. Put away your arrogance, put away your pride, put away your independence, and put the government of your life on his broad, eternal, everlasting, sufficient shoulders. You then will know what he says in Isaiah chapter 12. You will trust and you will not be afraid. He will be your strength. He will be your song. He is your salvation, and you will joyously draw water from the springs of salvation. And you know what? You will know, even as we're going to know when he comes to reign on the face of this earth in his millennial kingdom, you and I will know ahead of time, great is the one that is in the midst of you. Because when you belong to God, John tells us in John 14 and John 15 how the Father and the Son and the Spirit abide in us. They dwell in us. They are in our midst. So of the increase of his government, there will be no end. More and more and more, you and I are to depend on him. You know, Hebrews talks about a rest, the rest of faith. It says, there remains therefore a rest to the people of God. And when you look at that verse, it says, for the one who has entered into his rest has himself also rested from his works, even as God did. God got it all made, all created in 6 days, and then God rested. He has a glorious rest for you and for me who trust him and who cling to him. Oh, beloved, get on your knees and just say, I trust in you and I will rest in you. And anytime trouble or problems or afflictions or conflicts come, I'm just going to take it and roll it over on your shoulders because you're my God.
Thank you for watching today. To order your copy of today's program, log on to our website at preceptsforlife.com. To download your free copy of the study guide or to find out more about Precept Ministries International, click on our website or call us today at 1-800-763-1990. Join us for our next program as Kay shares more Precepts for Life.
God got it all made, all created in 6 days, and then God rested. He has a glorious rest for you and for me who trust him and who cling to him.
Join us for our next program as we discover more Precepts for Life.